Hello. It's good to be back with you again. I'm sorry I've been so remiss in not talking to you sooner. I know YouTube is not the most intimate of communication mechanisms, but it's one of the best we have to get together. So I wanted to talk to you today on what most people call July 4th. Actually, every country in the world has a July 4th. It's only the United States of America that has an Independence Day that happens to be July 4th. So I prefer to call this Independence Day. When I see people in the street, when I was out earlier today, I would say Happy Independence Day. That, to me, has a lot more significance than Happy July 4th, which would work in every country. A minor point, but it seems to me we should be celebrating independence and then freedom. Certainly our Declaration of Independence did give us a version of freedom. It started the process of creating our freedom from Great Britain, and that is the freedom that most people think of when they think of freedom, the freedom from outside intervention, the freedom from some other country controlling the actions of your country and the people in it. And I don't want to diminish that, but that is the easiest of the historic freedoms. Almost all people at one point in time have been controlled by someone else. They've moved outside that sphere of influence or that direct occupation and moved on. That has been the constant of the human experience. That is a version of freedom, and it's a necessary but not sufficient process to create the totality of freedom. Totality of freedom was not, in fact, ensured by our Declaration of Independence. That totality of freedom and the real commitment to the totality of the four freedoms happened with our Constitution. So our Constitution really gave us what we can really describe as freedom, making us a free people. That was what was unusual about the United States of America. It wasn't unusual to break free from another nation. That had happened a countless number of times before. What was unusual was the second type of freedom. Freedom from your own government, a limitation on your government. The Founding Fathers were not anarchists. They saw an absolute need for government in its appropriate place. They enumerated the specific powers that the government, our federal government, could have and could use. But essentially, it was a process by which we delimited the actions of that federal government while still enabling it to have the power to function and accomplish those enumerated powers. But ultimately, the genius of our Founding Fathers was not their severance from Great Britain. That was a commonplace historic event. Their genius was in the design of a government that would enable it to function in a meaningful manner and yet preserve the freedom of the individual citizens of that nation. And I emphasize individual citizens. Within the design of America, every one of us is as important as the whole. This is not a society designed in a model by which the individual is to be used as a mechanism for the greater good, that we should be in fact forced by governmental edict to in fact be put at the disposal of our neighbors. It was not that kind of a process. Each one of us stands as a universe of humanity. Each one of us stands as a separate statement of the dignity of humanity. Each one of us stands as a statement of freedom. We are not collectively free. That has also happened time and time again. What is rare, and what is the genius again of our Founding Fathers, is that we are individually free. Leading us to a discussion of the third freedom. The third freedom is freedom from our neighbors. Our Founding Fathers recognized that the tyranny of a despot, or the tyranny of the mob, the tyranny of our neighbors, were equally dangerous, equally offensive, equally threatening to the well-being of the people. So again, within the genius of our Founding Fathers, they created a system by which we are free of our neighbors. And as long as I don't break their bones or steal their purse, They have no claim on me. They have no right to me. They have nothing to say about my actions. They have nothing to say about who I am and how I lead my life. This leads us to the fourth type of freedom. And the fourth type of freedom is one that government can have very little hand in, but it must, in fact, create the freedoms that allow the potential of its occurrence. The fourth freedom is freedom from yourself. We are all raised within ideas, within dispositions, within biases, within preferences, within philosophies. Some of them are wonderful, some of them are positive, some of them are very destructive. One thing we must be able to do is intellectually, rationally, become free of ourselves. We must be able to step outside of ourselves, understand the nature of our irrational provocations, and reject them where they are dangerous or destructive to our neighbors. If we don't do that, then the tendency is for the neighbors, including you or me as the case might be, to band together to try to suppress the actions of another neighbor. Therefore, that third freedom becomes seriously damaged. That is the freedom from the intrusion of your neighbors. And generally, if your neighbors are then threatening your freedom, they pressure the government to enforce that code, that behavior, that set of values. So therefore, ultimately, what we see is that the second freedom becomes impaired. That is freedom from your own government. And typically this creates such a disillusionment with your own government that it makes you ripe for the intervention of outside authorities. In fact, you need ultimately all four freedoms. You need the first as a necessary but not sufficient cause of the others. You need to have a legal process by which individual freedom is given a sanctity. And I use the word sanctity as a well-chosen word. We also must have a legal process where I am free from my neighbors. My neighbors have no claim to me. And then we ultimately have to be wise enough a people to understand that we are raised in environments as children. We're up to the age of 7. We basically are not processing, not screening, not filtering information. As we reach adulthood and as we try to reach this process by which we defend freedom, we must recognize that we come to adulthood carrying those burdens with us. We have to be able to get free of ourselves. Therefore, freedom is all four of those. Outside intervention, freedom from your own government, freedom from your own neighbors, and freedom from yourself. At its best, America has enabled all four of those freedoms to take place. Where do we stand in 2011, on Independence Day 2011? I'm afraid we're not very high on the scale of freedom. We could probably create a case that to the largest extent we are removed from outside intervention. But again, if you look at the discussions about cooperative activities with the United Nations, the movement towards a one world government, globalization, which all have some positive implication, but if they are done with the sacrifice of American sovereignty, then that is not to be seen as a good. And yet, it does seem to be a potential that is occurring right now. If we talk about freedom from our own government, of course not. Our government has decided that they have the right, they would probably see as the obligation, to create a perfect society. And remember, perfect is a word associated only with despots. No constitutional republic deals with the word perfection because we know within human systems perfection is not possible. Only tyrants think of perfection, their version of perfection, of course, not some universal standard of perfection. If we look at Mussolini or Hitler or any of the tyrants throughout history, they are moving their society towards a variation of perfection, theirs. America is not about perfection. America is allowing the idiosyncrasies of the individual to exist. Many of them are not pleasant. Many of them might be seen as personally unacceptable, but that is our freedom. That is the source of our genius. Our genius is a derivative of allowing individual freedom to flourish to the extent where it creates the genius that drives the remarkable engine that is the United States of America. Free from our neighbors? No, I'm afraid not. I am at the disposal, apparently, of my neighbors. What I think, how I talk, what words I say, how I eat, whether I smoke. My whole process is, in fact, now defined as something that must contribute to the common good. How much salt I take in, my amount of sugar, how much profanity I may use in private. Almost everything is now being monitored by government, and we are seen as nothing more than part of the mix for this perfection of government. And to do that, they must control us. Our neighbors are part of our lives, and the ability to escape from ourselves, no, it's not encouraged whatsoever. We are told to commit ourselves to who we've always been. We are told to commit ourselves to our cultural backgrounds. We are told to commit ourselves to every whimsical notion of reality that ever came into our minds before the age of 7. That isn't what wisdom should tell us to do. And yet it is where we are as modern America. Our challenge on Independence Day 2011 is to regain not only that primary freedom, but all of the freedoms. Is it possible? Of course it's possible. We have a document in place called the Constitution that not only makes it possible, but it demands it. We must recognize that attacks on the Constitution are in fact attacks on the United States of America. When we say we are patriotic or we love America, we are talking about our commitment to the Constitution. If not that, then what? If we are not loyal to the Constitution, then what are we loyal to? When officials are sworn into office and they swear to defend the Constitution and then make statements totally rejecting it or making it of limited value in modern decision-making, they are, in fact, turning their back on America. What we have to do merely, and I say merely advisedly, all we have to do is restore the integrity and the respect for the Constitution of the United States of America. That sounds very easy, yet in 2011, it seems to be in many moments an almost impossible task. I thank you for listening. I'll be back to you soon. I won't have as much gap between now and the next time. So thank you very much.